again because I really wanted
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Tisztelt elnök úr!
President, Madam Commissioner, honourable members of the European Parliament. Very often people say that because of the economic crisis we don't have money for gender equality. I'm afraid I don't accept that argument. It's just an excuse. We should always pay attention to gender equality. We have to solve this issue. It's therefore very important to have the right legislation in place and to respect that legislation. We're talking here about an essential topic, namely the way in which gender issues have been taken into account in the European Union when it comes to the first directive that actually pertained to this matter. How has it actually been implemented in practice? Now, what we need to do in order to assess that is use a Commission report that would include lots of new data, lots of new information. But unfortunately, the Commission has not been forthcoming with that report. It was supposed to be ready on time, but unfortunately, in the meantime, we had the Test Achat case. And because of the Test Achat case and its ramifications, this report has not been published. Now, you may be aware of the case. The ECJ stated that as of the 14th of December 2012, when it came to services, when it came to goods, you could no longer have any kind of differentiation between the sexes. Now, the consequences of that ruling are difficult to understand perhaps at this stage, but I know perfectly well that it will lead to, for instance, increases in premiums. Now, particularly at a time of economic crisis, I think that this kind of ramification is simply not acceptable, and therefore I would ask you please to take into account that this is an important matter and it needs to be followed up quickly. We need to be able to review the implementation of the directive, because at the moment we don't really have legal certainty. And also, with regard to the short term, I very much hope that the Commission is going to institute proper dialogue with the industry to look, for instance, at risk assessments, look at statistics, statistical methods, and also the whole issue of how premiums are calculated. You need to engage in that discussion. But that is really just relevant with regard to one article in this directive. In this debate, we want to look at the whole directive and how it has been implemented by our member states. We need to be able to compare shortcomings, and we need to be able to come up with suggestions for solutions to remedy shortcomings. I am absolutely confident that the Commission will be open to constructive cooperation in this area. That is why I would like to do my work here and perhaps give you some pointers, some guidelines as to what needs to be done in future. In my report, I tackle a couple of points, and I'll mention them very briefly on this occasion. First of all, we need to give some serious thought to the whole issue of media and education and how they tie in with this directive. As far as the Commission is concerned, I think we need greater transparency. I also think we need to look at the details of current infringement proceedings, and we need to know about measures that have been taken. With regard to gender discrimination or gender segregation, we need to have an open and public database so as to have access to that information. And it seems to me that when it comes to this directive, as with other directives, it seems to me that unfortunately transposition is not always at the pace that it should be, and yet it is so important to have transposition at the appropriate pace. So please, Commission, help the Member States out with this. We also need to draw attention to rights and to remedies, and that is precisely why we need campaigns to this effect. That's something I mentioned in my report in particular. 2013, I think, is an ideal year for European dialogue. After all, this is a European year for citizens, and I think it's important for us to provide information to our European citizens, to tell them about their rights as EU citizens, and to tell them about the opportunities that they can avail themselves of. Finally, I would like to thank the Secretariat, I would like to thank my colleagues, and I would like to thank the shadow rapporteurs for their work on this. I look forward to a further open cooperation with the Commission, and I can tell you that you can rely on me, you can count on me. I will do whatever I can indeed to help you out. So, Madam Commissioner, please pass that on to your colleagues as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Zita Gurmai. I give the floor to Mrs. Damanaki.
Thank you, President. The Commission welcomes this report by the European Parliament. It's really on a very important issue, so I would like to thank the rapporteur, Mrs. Gurmai, the shadow rapporteur,